I didn't need to hear the words to understand what was coming. The moment Sabrina's voice cracked, I already felt the shift in the room. It wasn't her tears that gave it away. It was Naomi. My wife stood up too quickly, no shock in her eyes, no confusion, no questions. Just clean, practiced movement, like someone who had already rehearsed her exit long before the first line was spoken. Sabrina sat at the far end of the table, one hand trembling over her untouched wine glass, the other resting on her stomach. Her voice came out fragile, almost delicate. "I'm pregnant, Caleb." The room froze. Then she added the second blade. "And it's yours." That should have been the moment the world exploded. But what stayed burned in my mind wasn't Sabrina's accusation. It was the way Naomi looked at me, cold, distant, already gone, before turning and walking out of her parents' dining room without a single word. No demand for explanation, no disbelief, no anger, just departure. That was when I realized this wasn't a family dinner gone wrong. It was a carefully staged ambush. My name is Caleb Arden, 42 years old, founder and CEO of Arden Civic Partners. From the outside, my life looked exactly like the kind people envy. Manhattan apartment, foundation galas, clean headlines, and a marriage that photographed beautifully. From the inside, my wife's family had been quietly building a version of me they could sacrifice the moment it became convenient. And before I tell you how one dinner turned into a public execution, and how I uncovered the secret Naomi thought would stay buried, stay with me. Because this story isn't really about whether I slept with my wife's sister. It's about how fast some people can construct a lie when the truth would cost them too much. The dinner had been Veronica's idea. Of course it was. My mother-in-law believed in elegant ambushes the way some women believe in church, with discipline, ritual, and the quiet certainty that performance matters more than truth if the silverware is expensive enough. She called it just family dinner. No press, no donors, no board members, just the townhouse on a quiet Thursday night. But Naomi had been strange all week, too calm, too polite, the kind of careful kindness people use when they've already decided your fate and are simply waiting for the right stage. Sabrina was even worse. She avoided my eyes, laughed too brightly whenever the room fell quiet, and spoke half a second too late, like she needed noise to hide behind. At first, I told myself it was ordinary family tension. That was my mistake. Dinner moved slowly through courses and small talk. Veronica complimented our Tribeca renovation in a tone that sounded casual if you didn't know how carefully she tracked assets she didn't own. Ethan asked two pointed questions about a foundation transfer that had nothing to do with food. Naomi barely touched her plate. Sabrina looked like she was waiting for a cue she had practiced too many times in the mirror. Then Veronica set down her fork. The temperature in the room changed instantly. Sabrina started crying. Not wildly, just enough. Veronica reached for her hand with theatrical concern. Ethan stared at me like he had been preparing to hate me for weeks. And Naomi stared at the tablecloth. Then Sabrina delivered the line. "I'm pregnant, Caleb." Silence swallowed the room. "And it happened after the fundraiser in March." I looked at her and felt something colder than shock. Calculation. Because March was too specific. March had records. March had timelines. March had cameras. "You need to be very careful about what you say next," I said quietly. Veronica stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "How dare you threaten her in this house?" I didn't raise my voice. That wasn't a threat. Sabrina cried harder. Ethan called me a disgrace. Veronica said she had always known Naomi married beneath her. And Naomi, my wife of 6 years, finally stood up. looked at me with something too composed to be heartbreak, and said softly, "Don't make this uglier than it already is." Then she walked out. Just like that. No questions, no demands, no disbelief, only departure. I didn't stay much longer. There was no point. The room had already decided who the villain was. I drove home alone. Naomi wasn't there, but two things were waiting for me: a half-packed suitcase in the dressing room, and the cold realization that this dinner wasn't the beginning of the problem. It was only where they chose to reveal it. The next morning, Veronica's attorney sent a letter suggesting we begin civil discussions around the marriage before the situation became more damaging. Too fast, too clean, too prepared. That was my second confirmation. I sent the letter to my own attorney and went to work. Not because I was calm, but because rage would have made me useful to them. By noon, I had security pull vehicle logs from the March fundraiser. By 2, I had event footage from the private entrance. By 4, I had a timeline. And Sabrina's story was already falling apart. She claimed it happened after the fundraiser, but at that exact window, I was on a live panel with 2 senators and 3 cameras pointed at my face. There was no missing hour, no shadowy opportunity, which meant the lie had been built with care. Then came the hotel receipt. Not mine, Naomi's, charged to a private suite at the Holloway Hotel 2 nights after the fundraiser. The same week, Sabrina later claimed conception. The same week, Naomi told me she was handling donor counsel. I stared at the invoice for a long time. Then I had the hotel pull archived security footage through counsel. One face appeared almost immediately. Grant Holloway, married donor, board connected, the kind of man who wore discretion like a tailored coat. He entered the suite first. Naomi arrived 8 minutes later. That should have been enough. But the real blow came next. Sabrina was never pregnant by me. The medical records linked to Veronica's family office showed only one name: Naomi. My wife was the one who was pregnant. The entire accusation had been manufactured so Naomi could leave the marriage as the victim, not the one carrying another man's child from a donor tied to the family's financial interests. They needed a cleaner villain. Me. The urgency, the dinner, the instant departure, the legal letter at sunrise, everything suddenly made perfect sense. They weren't reacting to betrayal. They were protecting a much more expensive secret. 2 nights later, the final confrontation happened at Veronica's townhouse. Same dining room, same long table, same silverware. But this time, I brought the truth with me. I placed the folders on the table one by one. Event timeline, panel footage, hotel records, suite entry photos, medical billing trail. Enough to collapse their story without me raising my voice once. Sabrina broke first, real tears this time. Ethan went pale. Veronica didn't move, which made her suddenly look much older. Naomi looked at the hotel stills for 3 seconds, then lowered her eyes. For the first time, she had nothing prepared to say. Veronica tried one last time. "This doesn't need to become public." I looked at her calmly. "It became public the moment your daughter used my name." That was when the carefully built structure finally collapsed. Not with shouting, not with drama, just the quiet, ugly sound of a lie that could no longer stay elegant. By the following week, everything changed. Sabrina withdrew her accusation. Naomi's exit from the marriage looked nothing like the victim story Veronica had written. Grant Holloway resigned from 2 boards quietly. And me? I kept the company. I kept my name. I kept the life I had actually built. But I did not keep the marriage. That had ended long before that dinner, maybe before March. Maybe the day Naomi decided that protecting the family's image mattered more than the truth. What stayed with me wasn't even the false accusation. It was that single look on Naomi's face when Sabrina said my name. Not shock, not grief, just readiness. That's what makes some betrayals impossible to forget. Not that they happen, but that the people closest to you can rehearse your ruin so perfectly, long before they ask you to sit down and watch it. If you stayed until the end, tell me, what's worse, being falsely accused or realizing the people who should have defended you were the ones who needed the lie the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. See you in the next story.